Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Sweet Sounds of Reading One-Stop Learning Channel. Now, my name is Tutor Vanessa, and today I'm going to share with you the missing link of 95% of all reading programs on the market and how that missing link may or may not be affecting your child. So, the missing link is 100% decodable words in stories. Now, decodable simply means that your child can read each and every printed word in a story without absolutely no help from you. And the reason this missing link is a problem, it's twofold. Number one, for brand new readers, by constantly being presented with any words above their reading skill levels, these children are being trained into the automatic habit of reading by memorizing chunks of words, relying on pictures, or just flat out guessing. And number two, for struggling readers, by forcing them to read words above their skill level, not their grade level. Words that they have not been retrained to sound out leads to frustration, feelings of failure, and negative feelings about reading and learning. But here's the missing link solution. The Sweet Sounds of Reading program offers the largest library of 100% I can read it all by myself, decodable readers. Now, unlike any other decodable readers on the internet, this program's I Can Read It By Myself K through 4 skill level short stories album is a progressive link to its step-by-step teaching children the letter sounds online free classes. And as a time-saving selection aid, each story offers homeschoolers, parents, and teachers a quick glance, completed classes required reference code. For instance, if you'll look here at the 3 stories that I've selected from the album to showcase as examples, in the very first story, see the yellow highlighted area? This is a K through 1 skill level story, and for your child or a student to be able to read the story independently, they will have had to complete classes 1 through 16 and class number 19 plus the homework companion books in order to read this story by themselves. All right. And here's another thing. Also, within each separate decodable reader story packet, you're going to find unique words preview, letter sound codes map, and a time words per minute reading activity exercise. Now, here's another thing. Because fluent reading, which simply means the ability to instantly break down the letter sounds as they're being read, and fluent reading has to happen as fast as the speed of thought. These decodable stories were developed to quickly create independent letter sound trained readers, not sight or memorization readers. Now let's quickly talk about the need for speed. The reason why a child has to be trained to be able to read faster than they can think is because if a reader spends all of his or her energy guessing, looking for context clues like titles and pictures and beginning or ending consonants or even word shapes, there will be no mental energy left to comprehend, understand, or recall what they just read, be it in a short sentence or a paragraph. So in other words, the longer it takes a non-letter sound trained student to read words, words become a mental drain that demands a lot of fractured attention and creates a slow reader. Now, speaking of slow readers, just how fast should your child be reading? Now, here's the thing. It can be very, very difficult for a child to keep track of ideas as they are developing within sentences and words within stories if the reading words per minute speeds are way less than the chart below. For instance, for a first grade student at the beginning of the school year, they should be reading at least 40 words a minute. A second grade student, 60 words a minute. A third grader, 90 words a minute. And a fourth grader, 120 words per minute. Now, to help you track the speed reading progress of your students, all you'll need are colored pencils, a timer, plus a speed reading report card document similar to the customized document that you see here on your screen, which is available for order. Okay. Now, this is a side note. Something else that's needed industry-wide or in the education field are letter sound trained authors. Authors of beginning and early reader children books are unfamiliar with the science and art of letter sound codes, and they don't know or they don't realize that by producing stories heavy with memorized sight words or filled with words above a student's actual skill level, all they're actually doing is developing another generation of disabled readers. But on the other hand, to be fair to the authors, developing a pure skill level story, it's really, really hard. And it could cause them some serious writer's block because of its limited vocabulary restrictions. Similar to the way it did Dr. Seuss when he attempted to write the Cat in the Hat for the first time. But here's the thing, the ability to create pure skill level yet interesting stories is an absolute necessity in order for first graders to remain being excited, eager learners, and for struggling readers to become excited, can-do readers. Now here's something that you all know. We're all familiar with the story The Cat in the Hat, right? But something you might not know is this. Because of its word limit instructions, it took Dr. Seuss 9 months to write The Cat in the Hat. When he was hired by a textbook house to write a beginning reader's book using only 223 pre-selected sight words, Dr. Seuss is quoted as saying the following: "They think I did it in 20 minutes, but that damn Cat in the Hat took me 9 months to write. I read that list 3 times, and I almost went out of my head. I said, I'm going to read this list one more time, and if I come across just 2 words that rhyme, that's going to be the title of my book." So as you can imagine, he stumbled upon the words cat and hat. The rest is history. A classic was born. Now here's another little side bit of history about Dr. Seuss. 4 years later, when he wrote Green Eggs and Ham, he was restricted to a vocabulary restriction, I should say, of only 50 words. Try that, authors. But anyway, I should say, what is Sightword teaching? Sightwords teaching. Simply put, Sightwords teaching focuses on the practice of teaching reading by having students commit to memory a list of common, everyday words as if they were reading logos. Instead of first learning how to sound out a word, this type of early reader teaching, which is part of the public education system called whole language, is reinforced by only using school books and beginning reading stories filled with sight words that are repeated over and over throughout the story. Much like commercials that are shown over and over again until you know the logos and or jingles by heart, right? But back on track, this words repetition method, it programs a child to instantly recognize words by sight and not letter sounds. Now here's a quick history of sight words and how sight words were taught to our grandparents or maybe even you. The Dick and Jane school reading booklets first came out in the 1930s, but became required teaching and used in public classrooms in the 1950s. The people in charge of schools agreed that only 58 words were used in common everyday speaking, and only these look-say words should be taught, but taught in a way that beginning readers could quickly memorize them. The way these high-frequency words were taught in the Dick and Jane booklets to our grandparents was by repeating the same words over and over and over and over again. For example, if I can call your attention to the box at the bottom of the screen here, the word look was repeated 110 times in these booklets. The word see was repeated 176 times, and the word oh was repeated 138 times. Now today, the same look-say system of teaching by having children recognize words by sight, not letter sounds, is still taught for the first 2 years of their school life. The main difference is the list has grown from 58 words to 223 words and is now called Sightwords. All right? Now, for a moment, if I can call your attention to all of the new and improved reading campaigns that have come through the public school system in the last 20, 30, 40 years, maybe 50 years, I should say. Listen to this list and see if you recognize any. Sight words, whole language, balanced literacy, synthetic phonics, reading recovery, open court, Common Core, electronic educational apps. All of the above teaching reading systems are really just the repackaging of the old look-say teaching reading methods. All reinforce memorizing learning behavior by applying high-frequency repeated words or repeated key punch actions programming. Speaking of lists, does this list look familiar? At the beginning of the school year, since the late 1950s, this type of Sightwords list has been sent home with first through third graders as homework with instructions to you parents to have your child practice until they memorize all of these words by heart. Now, this list is the first learning step of a Sightwords trained reader, and for many brand new and struggling readers, this list represents the development of lifelong word guessing and or word substituting reading habits. Now, the habit of guessing and substituting words not only changes the meaning and destroys the understanding of what's being read, but it also carries over to other areas of learning, such as math. When it comes to solving math word problems, many sight word trained students are learning disabled because of their habit of guessing and substituting or even making up words. For instance, in math word problems, whole language sight words trained students, they often guess when they should be actually analyzing. And then they attempt to analyze where they should be just using basic math calculations. Because reading words correctly by mastering letter sounds first will save their soul. To break these learned reading habits, we as parents, homeschoolers, and teachers must insist on 100% pure phonics first learning environments. But let's talk about my baby can read. Okay? Now, it's often by age 7 that many parents realize that their child is not actually reading, but guessing and memorizing. While many children with above average recall abilities may be able to read a memorized story or a story full of high frequency sight words, or effortlessly navigate and respond to the practice key bunch sequence of a computer reading program, this type of learner struggles to read or identify a word that they run across that's taken out of context, or if they are presented with a more challenging word or an unfamiliar, unrehearsed story. Now, unfortunately, by second grade, 2 precious years have been lost, and the child has most likely lost confidence and formed a negative opinion about reading that often lasts into adulthood. Once these habits develop, many never recover or become fluent readers. And here's one more scenario. It's called the fourth grade reading slump disorder. And this is a group of children who up until fourth grade were honor roll students, and then all of a sudden their grades began to plummet. One of the primary reasons is that in fourth grade, sight words and pictures are few and far between. Stories are more difficult and challenging that requires comprehension. And thirdly, the ability to correctly break down and read the printed word as is an absolute necessity. Now, with that being said, high school failure actually begins in first grade. Now, picture this. Each and every September, approximately 4 million first graders, enter schoolhouses. They're eager to learn how to read. But because of the latest teaching reading scheme, by winter's break, more than 1 million of them will have been made to be reading disabled. And every June, at the beginning of summer break, the same bunch of once eager readers are confused, frustrated learners whose attitude about school has been spoiled and have now become unmotivated students carrying the unconscious, unspoken belief that they're dumb and they can't learn. And 12 years later, the same bunch of socially promoted 1 million plus children will be functionally illiterate high school graduates and or dropouts whose entire reading experience was rotten to the core. Now that's kind of depressing, isn't it? And I'm an upbeat kind of person. So if you'll allow me just a few more moments, I'd like to end today's presentation on an upbeat kind of note. And I want to perform a skit for you. It's a spoof of sorts. And it's called Thank You Whole Language for Teaching My Children. And in this spoof, I've summarized everything that I've been sharing with you today. Okay? Here goes. The other day, my husband and I were riding along the highway and saw a sign for a town called Verona. But my husband read it out loud as Veronica. Now, it's very simple how he scienced up this word, you see. First, he applied context clues. He knew we were looking for a name. And then he applied the initial consonant V. And then he applied prior knowledge. He already knew of the name Veronica. He remembered that hot babe from way back in his Archie and the Gang comic book days. So he put all these whole language strategies together and bam! That's how he turned Verona into Veronica. But again, I just want to thank you, Whole Language, for your many pearls of teaching, reading, wisdom. Thank you for teaching context clues. Thank you for encouraging using prior knowledge. Thank you for calling attention to the tricks of using initial consonants. And thank you for teaching readers to use pictures and word shapes and other guessing at word tips. And thank you for inventing Look Say and the Dick and Jane series. Special thanks to the National Education Association for allowing the No Phonics, No Way posse 2 years of free promotion in their journals back in the early 1930s. I also want to give a shout out to a Mr. Artley for his contributions to the phonics bashing attacks of the 1950s and the 1960s. By working together, you all managed to essentially exterminate and remove phonics from all of America's public schools by the 1960s when my husband went to school. But getting back to my husband. A while back, while we were waiting to see his doctor, he picked up a pamphlet and he started reading about venereal diseases. Now, correctly reading the word as venereal should have been a piece of cake. I mean, especially considering we were sitting in a medical clinic. They had hammered in our heads all through high school about what would happen or what we would catch if we gave away our love too freely. But this is how it went down. Context clues told my husband that he was looking for an adjective. Next, he zeroed in on the initial consonant V. Then out came his prior knowledge. He simply thought of an adjective that was about the right length, give or take a few letters, that started with the letter V, and bam! He guessed vulnerable. Vulnerable diseases. What can I say? That's my whole language. Trained man. Thanks also to the marketing spin mastery of a Mr. Kenneth Goodman for being genius in jumping in on the whole wheat, whole foods, whole grains trends of the 1980s by repackaging the failed Look-Say experiments and renaming them whole language. Just think, if not for this Whole Foods-like mantra, the rescuing of children from the evils of phonics in the 1980s, where would the reading scores of the entire public school system be today? Thank you, Dorothy Strickland, for Emerging Literacy, a program based on the fantasy that reading is as natural as breathing, and if we just surround struggling readers with lots and lots of books, words will just magically leap off the page and into their reading-disabled minds and emerge fluently from their once illiterate minds. Thanks also to all the other whole language children book authors who for decades have cranked out textbook after textbook full of high frequency sight words. Thank you, Teachers College Columbia, for promoting whole language to teachers' colleges worldwide. Can you even imagine how infectious you've been by removing phonics instructions throughout the entire English speaking world? It's no small wonder that the public is completely confused about what works and what doesn't work in reading instructions. But once again, I want to thank you for my husband. A while back, he was reading about a church congregation. And do you know, even with prior knowledge, he's a preacher's kid, for God's sake. He even still managed to guess church constitution. Even though this was a while ago, I still remember it like it was yesterday. So thanks to you and all the other so-called experts who lash out continuously against only teaching pure phonics first, were it not for your tireless efforts, whole language would not have survived a single school year. So again, thank you for keeping the Look Say Whole Language movement alive today to create yet another generation of people who read just like my husband. Thank you, Marie Clay, for inventing the ridiculously expensive reading recovery and having it installed in virtually every public school today. It's disguised to be a vehicle designed to treat and fix children with reading disabilities who, quiet as kept, was caused by whole language. But anyway, reading recovery fixes reading problems with, wait for it, more whole language. But once again, thank you all for my husband. Hardly a day goes by that he doesn't demonstrate the successful dominance of whole language or balanced literacy or whatever it's being called today. Really, listening to him read is such an experience of shock and awe. I can't even imagine how he'll butcher the meaning of another story or guess what he'll say next. And neither can he. The sheer entertainment of listening to this man read leaves me speechless. I mean, he might read good news for God knows, tangerine for tambourine, important for impossible. He might guess signature for the word signify, or Vicodin as vitamin. Now, God help you if your pharmacist reads anything like my husband. I could go on and on about his reading gymnastics. The word mysteries never stop. But anyway, thank you, whole language people. Bless your little hearts, each and every one of you. Where would our children, the future husbands, wives, and parents be today without you? And thank you, audience, for your time. I hope something was heard or learned today that inspires you to act and engage in this program right now. I hope you've been motivated to share this video and subscribe to this learning channel. And I hope that you give me, your host of today's presentation, a thumbs up by clicking on that like button below. And I really hope that I see you in the next video. Thank you.